If used in the right ways, the job profile is another useful tool in the HR toolbox. Job profiles can provide a good explanation of the components of a job and what you are seeking in an employee when they are posted with your job openings on your recruitment website. In this conversation, Chris Bjorling and me, Bill Banham, consider ways to use job profiles wisely to recruit employees, define jobs, and provide direction for employees. We'll also explore bonus benefits of online job descriptions like the impact on your employer brand. Our guest expert this time for episode 3 is Serge Boudreau, founder and co-host of the popular recruitment and HR podcast, The Recruitment Flex. Serge has spent over 15 years in the recruitment space, including 10 years working for recruitment tech companies, and he has held the title of Director for Western Canada at Workopolis and at Indeed. Most recently, Serge was Director of Talent Acquisition at Robots and Pencils.
Serge, first question for you. What goes into creating a competency-based job profile? And then what kind of due diligence is needed when developing it into a job description?
Hey, Chris. Hey, Bill. Great to be on. So beautiful day here in Alberta, but great question. And I think the question goes pretty in depth as far as what we look at it, because there is a journey of how we look at job profiles to job description, then finally to a job ad. And these are 3 separate items that we look at. And if you think about what a job profile is, job profile really focuses on 3 things. It focuses on the skills, knowledge, and behavior to be able to do the particular job that you're looking for. My advice, generally, competency-based job profiles should be done initially by the hiring manager. So the hiring manager should have a really good idea of members on his team, other people that have done very similar role, and really figuring out what those core competencies are needed to be successful in this role. That's really when they should now engage HR. HR should really now focus on detailing and breaking it down and going more in depth, asking those questions, maybe going into other parts of the organization and trying to figure out what are those core competencies that you're going to put in the job description itself. Then it goes down to the job ad, and the job ad is usually done by either recruitment or marketing. There is a difference between a profile, a job description, and a job ad.
Okay, thanks, Serge. Serge, I've interviewed quite a number of people within the talent space over the last 6 months on the HR Chat Show, and I keep hearing that the number of skills that employers are going to be looking for as this big surge of employment of highly skilled workers certainly happens towards the second half of 2021, that number is increasing. Okay, but that probably makes things more complicated as well, because it's just more to siphon through. What are some of the most in demand skills? What are those skills that have to be on one's resume when they're applying for those jobs?
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting market. If we look at even at the start of 2021, doing this for 20 years, still being a practitioner, I've never seen a market like this. So if we look at the skills that are going to be needed in the near future and even in the far future, a couple of things that really stand out to me. This is really, the people that went to college and got an arts degree, and everyone was like, why did you get an arts degree? Because you won't be able to get a job. This next decade, this next 20 years is really going to be dedicated to the artists. So those people that can create content, that can copywriters, video and audio producers, editors, are going to be absolutely critical. But if we look at right now, the tech market is the perfect example. So if we look at the hard skills, so developers, data scientists, there is so much work that is needed. We're seeing in the tech sector right now around 30% increase in job postings and around 30% less people applying because the demand is so high in that sense. But we all talk about different roles, what is going to be needed, different skill sets. So anything in tech is going to be a valuable skill. Anything in data analytics, digital marketers are going to be extremely valuable. Then we can look at core skill competencies. And we talk about those is the ability to communicate is more important than it's ever been. Negotiating, collaboration, those are all key skills that everyone is looking for right now.
Oh, that's wonderful. I appreciate that. And, as we look at those types of skills and knowledge components that you're looking at for the profile, how do you get, when you're looking at creating that profile for an organization, how do you get that feel for the company's culture embedded in there so that it kind of either resonates with the applicant or it helps to ensure that the hiring manager is going to get somebody who really kind of molds into or fits into the culture that they're walking into?
Yeah, great question. So let's not forget that a job profile and job descriptions are not external facing documents. Really, when it's critical to showcase your culture, that is actually in the job ad. Um, and what I mean by that, and I think the perfect analogy. So when you're building the job profile, I think it's very important to have the key skills. So it's based on outcome based type of production from that particular employee. But when we're actually advertising, and I'll use this example. So really, if you look at what a job ad, and this is where you really showcase your culture, it's the front of the cereal box. The side of the cereal box with the nutritional information and the ingredients and the calories, that is your job description that is on the side of the box. The back of the box is another element that you use to recruit. So basically, when you're looking at job ads, when you're looking at what's going out to the public, the role has to be clearly defined. But the main part of it is actually how are you going to get people, especially in this extremely competitive market, to come work for you? So the cereal box, well, they'll tell you, hey, it's frosted, or you get marshmallows in it, or in the back of the boxes, you get a free toy. It's pretty much the same. You have to put the key skill sets, but you also have to put the reasons why someone should work for you, especially in the market that there is a ton of competition. So this is where you really showcase your culture. And when you showcase your culture, show the receipts. If you're going to say that you're a very diverse work environment, show the stats. If you say you're very kid friendly or friendly to women, do you have a daycare on site? So these are all things that just saying it doesn't mean anything. Show the receipts, and that will really showcase your culture.
I wonder, Serge, maybe it's a chicken and an egg. Which comes first? My guess would be the job profile needs to come first because you need to have a position to fill. But I don't know. Are there situations where the candidate profile comes first, when perhaps it's a startup, it's a fast growing business, and it's more about the types of people and the types of skills that they want to attract? Which comes first in that process, or actually, do you have to align them together? Do you have to build one out alongside the competencies within the other?
Yeah, I think you have to be careful because I think it can be done almost in any way. But a lot of organizations will focus on almost creating that candidate profile based on someone they already have in the organization. Be like, we want to hire someone exactly like Joe for this particular role, or Susie, or whatever the case is. Then in reality, you're creating a position based on a particular candidate profile that if something changes in that role, that candidate profile might not be the best fit at the end of the day. And people do leave. So if there is a role created specifically based on one candidate or persona, you might be in trouble. So I'm thinking you should always focus on the job profile first. What are the core competencies? What needs to be executed? And then looking at that and building the candidate persona profile from that job profile so you can get a match. You know exactly what you're looking for based on what that job profile is. So it can happen a lot of ways. I think you had a perfect example as a startup. In reality, you have Jim that's executing his job perfectly. You need to grow quickly. And that persona might be exactly what you need to get to the next level. But when you get to a point where you're hiring 50, 100, 200 people a year, that candidate persona profile can be a challenge because it might not be what looks like in 2 years from now, a year from now, as you're rapidly growing.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I'd love to pull you in here. You're a leader of a business. You've been a leader of people for many years. I wonder if you've ever had a situation where you and the others within the C-suite have said, well, we needed this type of person before you look at we need this job role filled?
That's an interesting question. And going back to where Surge was too, I think there's some differences, and I'm going to switch this or shift this a little bit. I think there's some differences in a startup compared with an organization that's trying to move out of the startup status into sustainable growth patterns too, because a lot of times the startup's not even going to have any thought of, they can't even spell HR. They may they may not even have a job profile that's out there. But I think historically for me, and partly because we do this, we kind of look at what are the outcomes, exactly where Surge was going, and then what are the capabilities or competencies that are required to produce those types of outcomes. And then we flesh that a little bit more, and then we were like, okay, and really to make that successful, we want this type of personality. We want this type of presence in our meetings or in front of our clients or working with our clients on a support capacity. There's there are people that can be really good out there doing things, but they don't fit that personality mold. So it's kind of getting it right, kind of down to, I think, where Serge was talking about the candidate profile. You kind of start with some of the core meanings behind it. What are the outcomes? Kind of then meld that into putting it into the candidate profile, which gives you the chance to look at that personality. And maybe you're trying to replicate Jim or Mary or Susie or whomever, but ultimately that new personality is going to come in. They're not going to be 100% fit, but as long as they're still delivering on those outcomes through the capabilities or the competencies, then you're going to have success with that process. At least that's what we've seen over the years.
Okay, Serge, now then, I'm going to challenge you because you are a consummate professional. You are a podcast host. So I know that you can do this in your sleep, upside down. So in 60 seconds or less, okay? I want you to summarize some of the insights from a recent interview that you hosted on the Recruitment Flex podcast. It was with Visi Recruiter CEO Joe O'Connor. And in it, you guys spoke about the value of visual job ads over text-based versions. 60 seconds or less, tell us a wee bit about that.
Yeah, I think the interesting story that came out of it, and I never thought about this, is he started the company. So Joe is a serial entrepreneur, been in every industry. One day he's sitting at lunch with recruiters, and one of the recruiters said have you noticed that all marketing is visual and all job ads, which is a marketing tool, are text-based, which is what gave him the idea to start a company that basically takes text-based job descriptions, moves into visual. And I think it makes a lot of sense because if you put in context, our brain processes images 60,000 times faster than text-based. Right there, that gives you a really good idea. And then if you look at how much time people spend on visual job ads compared to text-based job ads, it's almost double. So we're looking at almost double the time that the candidate will be going through a visual job description, a job ad compared to a text-based one. So I think there's a lot of validity. It's very valid. I think it's crazy that no one has come up with that idea before Visi Recruiter came up with it. So it was really interesting conversation.
I think it's actually brilliant, and I'm going to give a reason why. Because when you do put it into a visual, you can also put subliminal messaging in the background that highlights your culture, that highlights your work environment, shows some of those pieces that are out there as well as you work through it. If you do it right, there's probably a science that we've yet to define that will do that for us. But I think it goes into the marketing aspect, like you talked about, Serge. It's that we market so much. But then when we go to these pieces, we just go to the, black and white text screens, type stuff. And I think it'll definitely enhance the capability and get you, especially in a labor tight environment, it'll get you candidates that you may not have received before because somebody wrote a poor or quiet or, technical description or for their ad, and it doesn't resonate with the person.
Well, think about it. You're all in a sea of sameness. Everyone has very similar text-based job ads, and I hate to call them even ads because 90% of what's actually created out there are job descriptions that are put in in basically on Indeed and all the major job sites, and they're really not selling their job. They're just putting a bullet list of BS points of why someone should work with there, without really elaborating why this is a good company, especially in a tight labor market. Think about seeing a visual, very concise job ad over one that has 3,000 words. Which one will you be attracted to?
Exactly. So, Serge, as we look to wrap up, we're asking all of our guests the following. From a culture and people processes perspective, okay, what does a high-performing company mean to you?
Yeah, I think we mentioned a couple, and this is a tough question, even though it doesn't sound like a tough question, because it can mean so many different things based on the organization, the structure, and everything. But if we highlight overall what high performance culture is, and I think this one is like this point is going to stand out very much in the future, is transparency. So transparency is, we're all about selling what's great for our company, and most of it, I'll tell you, are exactly the same. The ones that are going to stand out is the organizations that are transparent in their process, they're transparent in what they do, but they're also transparent to the external market, especially when it comes to job seekers. So are you putting your salary there? Are you telling us about what's not as great working for your company? Because a lot of companies shy away from that. But in reality, be honest. Like, if in reality, if there's things that suck at working in your company, put it in a funny or intriguing way that people will know when they're coming in. I think that will make you stand out as far as how you showcase your culture, how you're processing that end. But if we look at other key things that really organizations have to really prove their culture and really be driven. So focus on outcomes. We always talk about that. I think that is something that is become absolutely critical going into this phase, going into the next world of work. Then we look at, are we providing the resources that are necessary for these people to be successful? And I think it was really interesting in the last year. What we've seen is a lot of people are burnt out. They're actually putting tons of more work, and the demands from the organization have been way higher as well. So are these employees giving those tools? Are you showcasing that? Then it's like anything else, is the leadership and the talent being held accountable for their culture and how they're managing and the outcomes. If they're not, I can tell you the culture of working within that company is probably not a good one.
That's brilliant. Sorry, that's brilliant. One last question for you. How can we learn more about you? How can we learn more about what you're doing and how you're doing it, and the presentations you give to everybody on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I just actually changed the world I'm at. So I was a full-time talent acquisition director for a company. I'm actually now consulting for several companies, and we've taken the Recruitment Flex to the next phase, which is our podcast. So if you want to get a hold of me, first of all, check out the Recruitment Flex. It's available on all major podcast platform. You can find me on LinkedIn, Serge Boudreau. Serge is Serge, Boudreau, Boudreau. I'm willing to connect with everyone. So that would be the easiest way to go get a hold of me.
Perfect. Well, Serge, that just leaves me and Chris to say thank you so much for being a guest on this episode.
Yes, thank you, Serge. We appreciate it very much.
This podcast is supported by Fidello Inc., a consulting firm specializing in improving human performance. Through their products and services, Fidello helps clients design, develop, and implement strategic integrated human resource processes and systems. Learn more at fidello.com. That's Fidello.com.